Miyamoto Musashi.
Hello everybody, just before we get started into this one today, I do want to say there are a lot of Japanese words. If I screw up the pronunciations, I did my best. Have a go at me in the comments below if you want. That's what they're for. Miyamoto Musashi was the greatest swordsman to ever come out of a nation of great swordsmen, and that would of course be Japan. His story, which has become the basis for countless flying swordsman oriental movies, is one of raw courage, unbridled ambition, and unparalleled mindfulness. In one-on-one combat, he defeated 60 opponents, yet his greatest legacy is his seminal work, the Book of Five Rings, which is still pored over by military tacticians and mindfulness enthusiasts 450 years after it was written. In this week's Biographics, we reveal the man that was Musashi.
Maybe I need to watch that. Dude has a lot of drones in the background, man.
There is much uncertainty over the details and dates pertaining to the life of Musashi. What follows is based primarily on his own account as recorded in the Book of Five Rings. Miyamoto Musashi was born in the spring of his own account as recorded in the pertaining to the life of Musashi. What follows is based primarily on his own account as recorded in the Book of Five Rings. Miyamoto Musashi was born in the spring of 1584 in the village of Miyamoto in the Yoshino district of the Mimasaka province in Japan. He was born into nobility, with his mother, who died giving birth to him, being the daughter of a minor local chieftain. His father, Muni, was a warrior in the Shinman clan who had become an expert in the fighting arts. He was especially adept at jujitsu, swordsmanship, and the use of the yata, an iron rod with fork-like protrusions. When he was in his 30s, Muni had been invited to the capital of Kyoto to duel with another highly regarded warrior in the presence of the shogun. Muni beat the man in 2 out of 3 bouts. The victory established Musashi's father as Hiho Sho, which means without equal in Japan. Muni was intent on teaching his son everything that he knew about the fighting arts. Although Musashi was a quick learner, he had a stubborn streak that saw him constantly clashing with his father. While everyone else treated Muni with the utmost respect and reverence, Musashi would often talk back and criticize his father. This resulted in a volatile relationship, which often culminated in violence. On one occasion, Muni took a knife and threw it at his son. Musashi managed to dodge the weapon, which buried itself in the wall beside him, but the father's anger, it was not over. He threw the 7-year-old boy out of the house, essentially disowning him. Musashi crossed the Kamasaka Pass to the province of Harima, where he traveled to the small village of Hirafuku. Here he was taken in by his uncle Darin. Darin had once been a warrior, but he had long ago renounced the fighting arts, becoming a Buddhist monk and living a life of study and meditation. He raised Musashi at his small Buddhist temple set on the edge of the village. Here the boy learned to read and to write, as well as to meditate and develop his spirituality. Musashi's real passion, however, lay with the martial arts. He spent countless hours alone in the woods, sparring.
The most important tool is your brain. Even these fighters, man. I bet his life is about to change because now he's learning about the mind, controlling his emotions, being at peace, being all that chakra shit, that they do, that monks do. You see this a lot with like your body. When you're young, you're athletic, but your brain doesn't know shit, man. That's why when you have athletes that are super composed at a young age, it's impressive because usually what you see at a young age is just raw athleticism, But when the brain eventually catches up, you see a shift, you see a difference in someone completely because they have experience now. The brain has aged up. The brain is mature now. It wasn't before. I'm curious. I'm interested to see how the rest of his life plays out now that he's working on his mind. I'm sure he's skilled. His dad was a fighter, so I think this guy is known as like a meditation guy. I've seen a lot of shit on YouTube where it's like a meditate with Miyamoto Musashi. So I think there's a manga maybe. Yeah. So curious to see how this experience with the monks shapes his approach to fighting. Because those are really, like, I feel like with his dad he learned all the fighting, but there's a lot going on here that needs something different than his dad. That's what he's getting now. Wonder if he'll go back.
Against the, however, lay with the martial arts. He spent countless hours alone in the woods, sparring against the unforgiving trunks of pine trees, his anger at his father being released as he built upon the skills that had been instilled by that great warrior. In his work, The Book of Five Rings, Musashi recorded that his first real fight occurred when he was 13 years of age. He related that a passing warrior by the name of Arima Kihai had put a sign up along the Sayo River challenging any local swordsman to a duel. The bold and impetuous Musashi took up the challenge, writing his name on the sign. Kihai considered the challenge a joke, but accepted it anyway, intent on teaching the young upstart a lesson. Musashi's uncle Dorin was shocked when he heard what his nephew had done. On the day of the challenge, he went ahead of the boy and attempted to beg it off. While he was pleading with Kihai, Musashi charged his opponent with a 6-foot quarterstaff. He caught Kihai off guard, clubbing him to the ground and then striking him between the eyes. With a succession of blows, he then beat him to death. 3 years later, Musashi left Hirafuku and set off to make his way in the world. He traveled along the Sanyodo, the old high road skirting the northern shore of the inland sea to the straits of Shimonseki. From there, he ferried across the waters to the port of Kokura and then on to Nakatsu. This was the castle town where his father now lived. Muni had entered into the service of Yoshitaka, the master of Nekatsu Castle. The teenager arrived, and then on to Shimonseki. From there, he ferried across the waters to the port of Kokura and then on to Nakatsu. This was the castle town where his father now lived. Muni had entered into the service of Yoshitaka, the master of Nekatsu Castle. The teenager arrived. Muni had entered into the service of Yoshitaka, the master of Nekatsu Castle. The teenager arrived to find his father's army were in the midst of a campaign to subdue the island of Kishu and wage war on the western provinces. Musashi was recruited into the force and soon found himself fighting alongside his father. It was his first taste of war. The campaign proved to be a great success, with 2 provinces being brought under the dominion of Yoshitaka. Following the campaign, Musashi's aging father retired from active duty, moving to the nearby port of Kitsuki. Yet, as the father exited from the world of mortal combat, the son, he was just getting started. The campaign, it had whet his appetite, and he was eager for more. Intent on becoming a great warrior, or swordsman like his father, he set out a path forward. He needed to perfect the art of swordsmanship, seek out and defeat other masters, and then found his own school of swordsmanship.
Bro, this is like a movie character, bro. This is a main character's storyline. Like, it's such a good storyline for a main character of something, A good origin
Never one
story.
to think small, Musashi set his sights on the most prestigious school of swordsmanship in the realm, the famous Yoshioka clan in Kyoto. He knew that if he could fully defeat even one member of this clan, he would put himself on the fast track to recognition as a master swordsman. So, without saying a word to his father, he rose early one morning, collected his few belongings, and set out to claim his destiny. He bartered his way onto a small merchant vessel to the port of Sakaki. From there, he set out on foot to Kyoto and sought out the Yoshioka clan. He threw down his challenge, which was eagerly accepted by their top swordsman, Seijuro. The duel would take place on the grounds of the Rendai Temple. When he arrived at the venue, Musashi leapt upon his opponent.
This is insane, though. This life, bro. And someone can just pull up to your door and be like, "Yo, I hear you can fight. I challenge you." And it's a fight to the death, and you have to just be like, I accept, because if you don't accept, I guess someone has to accept the challenge. But I feel like if I walk up to someone that's a renowned martial artist and I challenge them openly and they refuse to take the challenge, I've put them in a situation where they look weak now. It's pushy. It's very pushy.
On the grounds of the Rendai Temple. When he arrived at the venue, Musashi leapt upon his opponent without warning, just as he had done in his first duel, and felled Seijuro with a single blow from his Bokuto. The fight was over before it had even properly began. The shock defeat from his Bokuto.
Yo, why does he do that? That's not a good trait, but it's fucking war, bro. He likes to. It's almost like a sucker punch. I hope this gets explained. I hope it gets explained. Maybe it's some people could look at this as like a sucker punch. Like, wait for the bell to ring, bro. Don't just rush towards me. Wait for the ref to say go. But I guess that doesn't apply here. Maybe This guy went on to write a very famous military book. So maybe there's a, I'm sure, of course, it's just a perception thing. Of course, if you can catch your opponent off guard in a life or death fight, the better. Like, that's clever as fuck. It's just not honorable. But fuck honor. We're fighting to the death, bro. Keep your hands up. It's like boxing. Keep your hands up at all times. Like that dude that got sucker punched by Floyd. The guy that headbutted Floyd and then tried to apologize, and Floyd caught him because the fight was still moving. The guy was trying to be like, sorry. Floyd just caught him. Bang, bang. So this guy is probably in that moment of, okay, I'm waiting for the fight to start, and before he knows it,
morning, just as he had done in his first duel, and felled Sujiro with a single blow from his Bokuto. The fight was over before it had even properly began. The shock defeat of the top swordsman rocked the Yoshioka clan. Sujiro's brother, Denshichiro, was incensed at the manner in which the young upstart from the south had attacked his brother when he was unprepared. He challenged Musashi to a second challenge on the very spot where the first had occurred. This time it was the Yoshioka swordsman who charged first, attempting to strike a fatal blow with his 5-foot Bokuto. But Musashi managed to wrestle the weapon away from Denshichiro, using it to beat his opponent to death. The Yoshioka had now been bested twice blow with his 5-foot Bokuto.
Bro, this guy, like, the sort of violence he's capable of is crazy. But it makes sense, man. They were not all using swords. I guess you could just pick a weapon and master it. It doesn't have to be a sword. Pick a weapon and master it. It could be a sword, it could be a club, it could be whatever. Ideally get good at all things to an extent. But, bro, this is the second person he's beaten to death. You just chop my head off. That was a worse fate, man.
But a swordsman who charged first, attempting to strike a fatal blow with his 5-foot Bokuto. But Musashi managed to wrestle the weapon away from Denshichiro, using it to beat his opponent to death. The Yoshioka had now been bested twice in short order, and this was too much for their honor to bear. They decided that Musashi had to be killed. They devised a plan to ambush him in the woods outside of the hostel where he was staying. More than 100 Yoshioka students, armed with sticks, bows, and arrows, gathered under the leadership of Denshichiro's son. His name was Mata Shichiru, and he came up against Musashi. Unperturbed, Musashi rushed straight for Mata Shichiru, killing him in front of the others. Overawed, the Yoshioka fell back, allowing Musashi to slip away. Having established his supremacy by decimating the most highly respected warrior clan in the land, Musashi returned to Kyoto. In the space of a few days, he had brought down a school of swordsmanship that had reigned supreme for over a century. Still, he knew that he had a lot to learn in order to become the greatest warrior in the nation. From Kyoto, he traveled to the temple of Nara. Here he found a line of warrior monks who were experts in Hosorin-dure, the art of fighting with the lance. The temple master was fascinated with Musashi's ability to fight with 2 swords at once. Keen to test his finest student against the newcomer, he arranged for 2 bouts with a monk named Okuzoin. In neither of these fights was the lancer able to gain the upper hand over Musashi. Leaving Nara, Musashi traveled to Edo, a city that was teeming with accomplished swordsmen. Many of these swordsmen had forged their talents on the field of battle. Here Musashi opened his own dojo, one of hundreds in the city. News quickly spread of his unique style, and he soon was being flooded with students. One of them was Mizuno Katsunari, a well-respected and battle-hardened warrior. The fame of Musashi's dojo it spread, reaching all the way to Edo Castle and the shogun himself. He was invited to teach there, but declined when he realized that he would be subject to a member of the hated Yagyu clan. After teaching in Edo for 7 years, Musashi decided to return to Kitsuki, the town of his father. The aging Muni had set up his own dojo and was eager to pass it on to his son. Before he arrived back in Kitsuki, however, Musashi was to fight one more challenger. His journey home brought him to the small island of Funoshima in the Straits of Shimonoseki. It was here that he was challenged by a famed warrior by the name of Sasaki Kojiro.
It's like a video game, bro. Boss fight after boss fight after boss fight.
This was a man so fierce that he had earned the moniker Demon of the Western Provinces. He was a master of Nadachi, the great Japanese sword. Legend tells us that Musashi's only weapon was a bokken, or a wooden sword that he had carved from an oar of the boat that had brought him to the island. With this, he managed to subdue pursue and kill Sasaki. He then immediately jumped into his boat and rowed out to sea in order to get away from Sasaki's enraged followers. Musashi now completed his journey to Kitsuku, where he began teaching at his father's dojo. For 3 years, he lived and worked in the small seaside village. During this time, his fractured relationship with his father got no better, with the old man criticizing his son's martial ability at every opportunity. When Muni died at the age of 85, Musashi was more relieved than saddened. Shortly after his father's passing, Musashi received a letter from his former student, Mizuno Katsunari. War had broken out between the great clans of Tokugawa and Toyotomi. Katsunari was about to take part in the siege on the Tokugawa side, along with his eldest son, who was just 16 years old. Katsunari requested that Musashi serve as part of a special escort of 10 men broken out between.
My mind wandered. He mentioned something that took my mind elsewhere.
Musashi received a letter from his former student, Mizuno Katsunari. War had broken out between the great clans of Tokugawa and Toyotomi. Katsunari was about to take part in the siege on the Tokugawa side, along with his eldest son, who was just 16 years old. Katsunari requested that Musashi serve as part of a special escort of 10 mounted warriors for his son. The 30-year-old Musashi saw this as his opportunity to jump back into the thick of combat. He set off from Kitsuku to the port of Sakaki. He was determined to be the protector in battle of the young son of his beloved student. He met up with Katsunari's forces, riding at the head of 4,000 men as they advanced on Osaka and then on to Kokobu, a hamlet.
What a fucking painting, dude.
Made up ahead of 4,000 men as they advanced on Osaka and then on to Kokobu, a hamlet made up of a few farms stretching along the southern bank of the Yamamoto River. Just a few miles downstream, a large enemy force had gathered. That night, however, Katsunari's army managed to surround the Toyotomi forces. The attack was ordered at 10 p.m., the hour of the snake, and the Toyotomi were sent reeling. They fled across the Ishii River, only to be chased down by Katsunari's men. Musashi was in the lead, wielding his favorite weapon, the Bokuto. Records tell us that he stood on the heights of a bridge, sending one enemy warrior after another flying with the deadly blows of his trusty Bokuto. The Osaka winter
How big is that thing?
To be chased down by Katsunari's men. Musashi was in the lead, wielding his favorite weapon, the Bokuto. Records tell us that he stood on the heights of a bridge, sending one enemy warrior after another flying with the deadly blows of his trusty Bokuto. The Osaka winter and summer campaigns, in which the Tokugawa were victorious, put an end to the resistance of Japan's western warlords. The culmination of the hostilities was the siege of Osaka Castle. It was the largest battle in which Musashi would ever take part, with many thousands of warriors being slaughtered on both sides. Among those of his comrades to fall was Nakagawa Shimanosuke, who was stricken down as Katsunari's men had stormed the southern gate of the castle. The man had 3 sons who traveled with the army. The 2 older boys took part in the siege, but the youngest was just 11. With the death of his father, the young man now needed a guardian. Musashi took the boy Minakosuke under his wing, adopting him as his son, and set off for the castle town of Himei. From there, they went on to Hirafuku, where his stepmother lived. For the next 2 years, he lived here, caring for his elderly stepmother, while also providing for his new son. Many hours each day were spent imparting to Mikinasuke the fighting skills that he himself had learned as a young boy from his own father. This tranquil existence was interrupted when news reached the village of Hirafuku that Ikeda Mutsumasa, the current lord of Himei Castle, was going to move. The new lord was going to be Honda Tadamasa. Musashi saw this change in leadership as an opportunity for his adopted son. During the storming of Osaka Castle, Tadamasa had been in command of the 2nd Eastern Phalanx, directly behind the troops of Katsunari, where Musashi was stationed. He had, therefore, seen Musashi in action in the heat of battle. Musashi requested that his son, Mitsumasa, be given duty in the lord's household. Tadamasa agreed, and the boy was made a page to his own son, directly behind the troops of Katsunari, where Musashi was stationed. He had, therefore, seen Musashi in action in the heat of battle. Musashi requested that his son, Mitsumasa, be given duty in the lord's household. Tadamasa agreed, and the boy was made a page to his own son, Tadatoki. At the same time, Musashi was hired by the neighboring daimyo, Ogasawa Tadazanya. He was appointed as an advisor to the magistrate in charge of the construction of a huge building project, the construction of Akashi Castle. This was followed by the planning of the town of Himei. Musashi was also in charge of the castle gardens and oversaw the construction of a tea house, miniature mountains, and a miniature lake. He proved to have a meticulous eye for detail and was obsessive in getting every tree, shrub, and stone placed just right. The years that he spent at Akashi were the happiest of Musashi's life. As well as planning out the landscaping and tending to the gardens, he instructed his retainers in the art of fighting with two swords. He also enjoyed hearing of the successes of his son, who grew in favor in the house of Tadamasa. In the spring of 1626, Lord Tadatoki was struck down with tuberculosis, being forced to keep his quarters at Hime Castle. After a 3-month struggle with the disease, he died at only 30. Musashi knew all too well what this meant for his son. As the key retainer of the stricken lord, Mikinosuke was customarily bound to commit seppuku, a ritual suicide by disembowelment. Mikinosuke's death left a deep emotional scar on Musashi at only 30. Musashi knew all too well what this meant for his son. As the key retainer of the stricken lord, Mikinosuke was customarily bound to commit seppuku, a ritual suicide by disembowelment. Mikinosuke's death left a deep emotional scar on Musashi, from which he would never
What a fucked up practice.
fully. Mikinosuke's death left a deep emotional scar on Musashi, from which he would never fully recover. For months, he shunned all company, retreating to the forest to commune with nature and tried to come to terms with his great loss. Almost exactly a year after Mikinosuke's death, Musashi adopted a second son, a boy named Lori, who was the second son of Tamara Hisamitsu, a samurai in the service of the lord of Miki Castle. When that castle had been overthrown by the Tokugawa army, Hisamitsu took up the life of a poor farmer. When he died, his younger son, Lori, became an orphan. Musashi took him in and arranged for him to enter the service of Lord Tadazanya. The boy would eventually attain the rank of senior retainer, stationed on the southern island of Kyushu. Musashi moved there to be closer to the boy and spent the last 20 years of his life on the island. Musashi built a large dojo on the island and soon had a huge following, all eager to learn from the great master. Even though located on a remote island far from the main centers, many martial arts masters visited his dojo to experience the art of fighting with two swords. The aging Musashi was respected and admired as a great martial arts grand master. Still, he was, as he had always been, an outsider. He did not groom himself, as was expected. He left his hair grown long and unkempt. He also seldom bathed and refused to wear the traditional attire of a swordsman of that time. In his waning years, he even abandoned his two swords, preferring to carry and use nothing more than a 5-foot wooden staff. In early 1638, an armed revolt broke out in the province of Hizen.
What?
The rebellion was made up of Christians, led by
I love that detail about him. Dude is a master swordsman. Double wielding. But he'd rather use like a 5-foot long wooden staff. 5 foot isn't that long. But it's a club, basically. You know? It's not that like unreasonably long, but it's a blunt object to beat the fuck out of people with. He must have been really strong. He must have been really strong. Or like, what's the advantage of that? Most people you're fighting probably have lances, swords, and there you are. With like it's basically just a slab of wood. You know? Like a club, basically. Yeah, but I get it though. You have to be so confident to be like, okay, this will be my weapon of choice against these guys that have swords and shit. You know? But I've always been fascinated by characters like that. Like Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones. His weapon of choice was a hammer. A hammer. Like, I feel like swords are easier to... You just need to get good with the intricacies and the movements. If you master that, it's easier because it's a bit lighter. I'm sure there's weight to it, but compare that to a fucking hammer. A club, dude. Beating. I get it. It's how some people like striking and some people like grappling. If you are a brute with raw strength, I get why you'd want a hammer. Because you don't have... With a weapon like that, you sacrifice accuracy, you sacrifice. You don't have to be super precise with your strikes. You can just go nuts. If you have that rage in you where you can go like psycho mode in a fight, that would be the perfect weapon, because you can just swing it everywhere you want to swing it. You don't care. Dude, if this thing just brushes on your elbow, you're fucked. If this thing just brushes on your chin, you're fucked. I don't have to be accurate with this. I will beat the fuck out of you with this. I get it, man.
By 17-year-old Amakusa Shiro, province of Hizen. The rebellion was made up of Christians, led by 17-year-old Amakusa Shiro. They numbered rebellion staff. In early 1638, an armed revolt broke out in the province of Hizen. The rebellion was made up of Christians, led by 17-year-old Amakusa Shiro. They numbered more than 20,000 men. They had ensconced themselves the long-abandoned Hara Castle. Lord Tadazanyo, the employer of Musashi's adopted son, engaged the aging master to escort his 23-year-old son to the battlefield along with 8,000 men. Musashi stayed at the boy's side throughout the entire siege. When the defenders inside the castle threw boulders down from the walls, he leapt in front of the lord's horse and fended them off with his staff. Musashi hadn't been back from the rebellion for long when he was approached to take up a position in the household of the daimyo of one of the largest fiefs in the country. This was Hosokawa Tadatoshi. He wanted Musashi to relocate to Kumamoto and instruct his retainers in the art of fighting with two swords. The swordsman accepted, arriving in Kumamoto in September of 1640. He was given a comfortable mansion on the northeastern side of the castle grounds. Musashi took to spending much time in the mountains of Iwato, where he would while away the hours in meditation and contemplation. He found a cave which afforded him perfect solitude. It was here that he began to put his thoughts to paper. In the early spring of 1645, he completed the first draft of the work that would make him immortal down through the ages, the Gorin no Sho, or Book of Five Rings. The book had taken 5 seasons to complete, each one seeing the completion of one long rings. The book had taken 5 seasons to complete, each one seeing the completion of one long scroll. He named them the Scrolls of Earth, Fire, Water, Wind, and Heaven. Shortly after the completion of his great work, Musashi's health took a sudden turn for the worse. Within a month, he was no longer able to teach. He withdrew to his house outside the castle walls. Feeling his life ebbing away, he summoned his chief retainer and handed in the Gorin no Sho. Having passed on his legacy, he then closed his eyes and allowed the life to drain from his body. It was June the 13th, 1645. Shortly after his death, a stone memorial to be known as Mound Musashi was erected not far from his home in Kaido. For centuries thereafter, passers-by would dismount from their horses to pay homage to the greatest swordsman that Japan would ever produce. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and do not forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this every Monday and Thursday. Also, check out some of our videos from the archive. They're over there on the right.
That was a good one, man. Miyamoto Musashi, like I said, I've come across videos on YouTube many times where it's like meditate with Miyamoto Musashi. You know, so I just thought he was like I thought he was some monk, you know. I didn't know he was like, I guess I knew. I think the meditating and the meditative verse, it's funny because he's a samurai, but I feel like he's more remembered for maybe the 5 rings. I haven't read the book. Maybe it's worth reading. Maybe that's what he's remembered for the most. But I think he's also really remembered for this meditation stuff, you know. Very interesting guy. Yeah, someone definitely worth learning about. Miyamoto Musashi, the lone samurai. See you guys. You have any more info on this guy? Interesting info? Share it, bro.